What's up, guys? Time for another video. This is Kit, and today we're going to be talking about... Move that around. There we go. Today we're going to be talking about rod lengths and why it's important to get the right rod length for the kind of fishing you do. Now, there's a lot of rods out there, and it's very easy for someone who doesn't really know much about fishing to go into a tackle shop and you see rows and rows of rods, and I was like that before as well. So we're gonna break down exactly what rods I use for what purpose, and we'll start from there. Okay, so I have my favorite rod here. It's nothing special, really. It's a rod that I've had for a very long time, and this is a 7-foot rod, and it's a medium action, and I have a 4,000 size reel paired with it. And I use this rod for pretty much well, all sorts of fishing, really. Most of the time when I go fishing on a boat, this is most likely what I would have with me. It is a 7-foot, 6 to 12, so 6 to 12 pound rod, and it's a very good all-around rod. I've had this for years. I mean, this is literally older than my daughter, and my daughter's 9 years old, and it's been with me for a long time for a very good reason. It is a great all-around rod. Now, there are a lot of rods in this category that are shorter, but most of the time I tend to use longer rods, and one of the reasons for longer rods is range. So when you have your rod and reel balanced, so you have the right sized reel, the right sized line, and the right sized lure, it casts way better, and it's comfortable. You can use it the whole day without really experiencing fatigue or whatnot. It's quite enjoyable to use. Okay, so the importance of a balanced rod and reel cannot be stressed enough. So if you're in the market for an all-around rod and reel, and you're fishing, let's say, several types of fishing, so you're on a boat casting, and sometimes I even use this to throw jigs, small jigs, and it works great. So if I only had one rod and reel, it would be something like this. Okay. Now, what I'm about to show you is a light rod. Okay. The capacity of this rod is only maximum 15 grams. So with this one, I forgot to mention, this one takes most of my, if you can see there, that's a top water. So these days, most of the time, I use this for top water fishing, and this is its primary use these days. I throw 4-inch to 5-inch top waters with this rod, and I've caught Dorado on this, even small tuna. In Dubai waters, I've caught kingfish, goldies, and jesh, which is the orange spot trevally. Now, inshore, I tend to use something that's a little bit lighter. This is one of the rods. I have 3 rods that I have here, just as an example. So we're going from one extreme, like an all-around, to a bit more specific, like this one, and I'm using this specifically for some types of fishing. You don't have to get the exact rod and reel. you could use all of this as a guideline, just to give you an idea of exactly what you need or what you need to look for. So when you go into a tackle shop, at least you have an idea of exactly what you need. Now, this is a 2005 sized reel, and this rod is it's an 8-footer. Okay. Now, this is obviously only the half, and this is kind of like an all-arounder as well. But lately, what I've been using it for was also top waters and some jerk baits, small jerk baits of up to 3 inches. And I found that I'm getting more range with this as opposed to a 6-foot or a 6.6 rod. And one of the things that I like about longer rods is the fact that you get range. Okay, and most of the longer rods also have a bit of a short. They have soft tips, and what that tip does for you is cushion a lot of your mistakes. Not only is it sensitive, but because of the extra spring on the tip, when you're using line like braid, it absorbs some of the mistakes. It's not all, but some of the mistakes that you make. And the reason why I'm using mono on this one is this is kind of like a specific use. I'm gonna be using this line with some leader, okay, fishing really tiny lures, and I'm gonna be fishing around rocks. And you might find it weird that I would be using this around rocks because it's long, but the reality is when you're casting parallel to rocks, okay, a longer rod, once you point it out to the water, would give you more clearance, and you're fishing for fish that are close to the rock. So we're talking about quite a few species of brim and some other fish that live around the rocks, like take for example grouper and snappers. So when you're casting parallel to the rocks, you have 8 feet of distance from the rocks to the rod tip, and when you're reeling the fish away from the rock. So it's as opposed to a 6-foot rod where you only have about 6 feet, and that's really not much there. Also, when you're fishing sand, it lifts your line off of the sand higher than a 6-foot rod. So your angle is not gonna be like going like that. It's more of, kind of like that to the drop off. And trust me, that drop off could have rocks and other sorts of snags and nicks. And if you have a longer rod, you prop it up and your line is higher to the bottom than a shorter rod would be. And this is one of the reasons why when I fish, say with this big one, okay, this is 12 feet. Okay, this is 12 feet. And it's used exactly for that. Now, when you're fishing with an 8-foot rod or an 8.6, which is common for shore jigging, so it starts out at about 8.6, and then 9.6, and then there's 10, and then there's, I guess it tops off about 10 or 12. Some rods are 12, but they're kind of heavy. So this particular one is rated up to 60 grams, but it's a lighter rod than most rods, which are like, there's some Hira rods out there, Hira, Hira rods from Japan, and what they are really long rods designed for really long casts. Because with a long rod comes range. Okay, you have a 6-foot rod and you're casting out, and there are tricks to maximum distance. Okay, there are ways. One of the things that you could do is actually put an oversized reel, and it gives you a bigger spool. And with a bigger spool, the line tends to go out in, especially with spinning reels, the line tends to go out in bigger coils, and that gives you a bit more range. Also, dropping your line size to the minimum, that the recommended minimum for the reel, also gives you range. So take for example, if the normal line for the reel is PE3 and you drop down to PE 1.5, that gives you the maximum range that the reel can handle or your rod can handle. Now there's a lot of science in distance, and a lot of it has to do with friction, but let's not go there for now. Now let's we'll do that in another video. But with a longer rod, it gives you longer range. It's physics. Now what a long rod also does is, like I explained earlier, is that when you lift your rod, your line gets lifted off of the bottom farther, okay, and whatever snags are there, you avoid it. And for me, that's one of the most important things, and this is the reason why I love using this really long rod for shore jigging. Now a lot of people would find it a bit long. Most likely they it doesn't fit their style or whatnot, but see, for me, you only catch the fish of your lifetime once, and you don't want to lose it. Sometimes a lot of people lose a big fish and wonder, and then they start to ask, why the heck did I lose that? And then after that they see that their braid is braided, and they go like, oh, okay, I have a bad braid and whatnot. But see, for me, that's under your control, and if it's your control, it means you could have avoided things. So for me, I'd rather do the things that I can to avoid those mistakes. And if I do hook something big, I actually have the biggest chance of landing it by just pulling up. It's that easy with a long rod. And you know, we're not talking brands. There's a lot of brands out there. But if you could find a long rod that would suit your purpose, then it's great. Now, if you notice, this is probably in its class, this is kind of long, and it, again, it's for that reason. We're talking of the medium action rod. There's a 6-foot version of this, there's a 6'6" version of this, but I got the longest that I could. Now the same goes for the 8-footer. There's a shorter version. There's shorter versions of these rods, but I always choose the longest that I could find. And the biggest reason is, it's just being able to get the distance between your line and the bottom. Okay, as soon as you pull up with a longer rod. Now, a lot of people say like, well, you know what, I stand on rocks, and you know, when I'm casting, I'm a bit of distance from the bottom and whatnot. But see, that's just it. The longer your rod is, the farther it is. The farther your line is from the bottom, and that's a big thing. And God knows how many times I actually, even with long rods, I actually still get rocked by a lot of fish. But having a long rod really helps, and it cuts down on a lot of things. Snags, abrasion from the drop off, or just rocks protruding in the middle of you know, the space that you're fishing in. So for me, long rods is it. Now, different when you're fishing on a boat, you could get away with longer, shorter rods, but that's a different story, and we'll talk about that soon. But yeah, well, I hope you learned something from this video, and I hope that kind of clears up why I like using longer rods when I'm fishing from shore. And don't forget to hit that like button. Don't forget to click subscribe for more of these videos, and I'll see you on the next one.